Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fanatic Breakdown Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Higgins, with all the latest NFL and NBA news. Today, I will be bringing you a Week 5 NFL review, and I don't have anything really for NBA today, although this season starts in exactly 1 week from today, which is Tuesday for me. You're probably listening to this Wednesday because I'm recording this late on Tuesday night, or not really late, it's like around 7:30 for me. But yeah, that's pretty exciting, but without further ado, let's hop into the NFL Week 5 review. Alright, I'm going to try to make this episode as quick as possible because, yeah, that's not truly important, but the first game I got on the schedule is the most uneventful, most boring game I've ever watched in the history of football. Thursday night, Colts-Broncos, which ended in a score of 12-9. Broncos lose. Colts over Broncos. For the Colts, Matt Ryan was not good. He threw 251 yards and 2 interceptions. He did just enough as like a game manager to get the win, though. And it turns out Deon Jackson was their leading rusher with 13 carries for 62 yards because Jonathan Taylor did not play. He was out with an injury. Phillip Lindsay also was okay. He had 11 carries for 40 yards in his revenge game. Their leading receiver was actually Alec Pierce, who had 8 catches for 81 yards. Michael Pittman did play in this game, but he didn't make nearly as much of an impact as Alec Pierce for some reason. He had 5 catches for 59. And then on the Broncos side of things, Russell Wilson also played quite bad. 274 yards and 2 interceptions. No throwing touchdowns or no passing touchdowns for either of these quarterbacks. Melvin Gordon was their leading rusher with 15 carries for 54 yards. And Mike Boone had 7 carries for 38 yards. That's also because their leading running back, Javonte Williams, is out for the year. That both of the starting running backs were injured. I guess you could say Melvin Gordon is like he split carries with Javonte Williams, but it was Javonte Williams' backfield, if we're being honest. Melvin Gordon has struggled with a fumbling problem. He didn't Thursday night, but they still couldn't get the W. And then their leading receiver was Cortland Sutton with 5 catches for 74 yards. And then Jerry Jeudy with 3 for 53. Colts over Broncos 12-9. All right, now this was a Sunday morning game in London. Sadly, I did not get to watch it because I was at church. Everyone should be at church, you heathens. But I digress. Giants actually overcome the Packers in a stunning upset. Giants win 27-22. The Giants, for the Giants, Daniel Jones was really nothing spectacular. He threw 217 yards, 0-0 ratio for touchdowns and interceptions. But Saquon Barkley has just been absolutely remarkable this year. Talk about a comeback. He had 13 carries, 70 yards, 1 touchdown. He very well could win Comeback Player of the Year, especially because Christian McCaffrey has not been good this year whatsoever. Well, not whatsoever. And I'll get into something that the Panthers did recently that might help Christian out. But Saquon Barkley is looking like a candidate for that. Receiving, it was Darius Slayton with 6 catches for 79 yards. And then Saquon was their second leading receiver with 3 catches for 36 yards. I mean, good for him. Because they have a lot of receivers who have been out. Wan'Dale Robinson, Kenny Galladay, Sterling Shepard's out for the year. So they're bruised for sure. And then on the Packer side of things, Aaron Rodgers definitely had the better game out of quarterbacks for sure. He had 222 yards and 2 touchdowns. Aaron Jones was their leading rusher, to nobody's surprise. He had 13 carries for 63 yards. And then A.J. Dillon only had 6 carries, but did get 34 yards out of those 6 carries, which is almost 6 yards a carry. It's pretty good. Their leading receiver is Randall Cobb, who had 7 catches for 99 yards. And I actually find it very interesting that Randall Cobb and Allen Lazard have been getting the ball so much. Like, I thought they would have leaned on Christian Watson maybe a little bit more than they have, as well as Romeo Doubs, who are younger guys who might be a little bit more explosive. But Randall Cobb and Allen Lazard have been the top targets because Aaron Rodgers trusts them. So, I mean, I can see where they're coming from. I'm just surprised that these guys haven't been getting more action. Speaking of Lazard, he had 4 catches for 35 yards and 1 touchdown. Nobody else really worth mentioning there. Giants upset the Green Bay Packers 27-22. All right, let's go Pats. Patriots over Lions 29-0. I am Zappe Happy. I just thought about that on the spot. I'm probably going to make that the title of this episode. That would be a pretty good title, more I think about it. But for the Patriots, Bailey Zappe ended up throwing 188 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was 17 of 21. He actually played very well. And the only reason he really got the start is because Brian Hoyer and Mac Jones were both hurt. I probably should have led with Mac Jones there because Mac Jones is the starter, but who cares? It's my show. I do what I want. Rushing, Ramondre Stevenson was really good. He had 25 carries for 161 yards. Damian Harris had 4 carries for 11 yards, and Damian Harris probably would have ended as the lead back, but he ended up getting hurt. He's expected to miss multiple games. I think they said it was his hamstring. I'm not quite certain on that though. Their leading receiver was Jacoby Myers, who had 7 catches for 111 yards and 1 touchdown. And then Hunter Henry had 4 for 54. So yeah, solid game for them. And then on the Lions side of things, Jared Goff had 229 yards, 1 interception. He really didn't look that great. He went 19 of 35. But the Patriots defense really wasn't flashy. Like, they won 29-0, but they played sound fundamentally, and they just held them to stops on 4th downs. Like, they didn't let anything crazy happen. Like, no crazy interceptions. Obviously, there was 1 interception, but no crazy forced fumbles or blocked punts, nothing like that. Their leading rusher on the Lions side of things was Jamal Williams, who had 15 carries for 56 yards, in the absence of DeAndre Swift for another week. Their leaders in receiver were Josh Reynolds, who had 6 catches for 92 yards, and then right behind him was Craig Reynolds, who had 3 catches for 68 yards, who turns out to be a running back. Amon-Ra St. Brown really didn't make a difference in this game, which is very surprising to me. I know he is coming off an injury, but I expect him to get a little bit more playing time. Although they're probably just trying to ease him back into things, not risk re-aggravation of that injury, which does make sense. But Patriots, you know what? I already said it. I'm Zappe Happy. Let's go, Pats. All right, the next thing I got on the schedule turned out to be way closer than I thought it was going to be. Chargers-Browns. The Chargers barely squeak out the dub against not injured, but if you keep up with the NFL, you know exactly what I'm thinking about. They have a backup quarterback in the game right now. I'm not going to mention it. But Chargers take it over the Browns 30-28. For the Chargers, Justin Herbert threw 228 yards, 1 touchdown. He was really nothing remarkable, but he gets the job done, and that's something you want out of a quarterback. It's way better than chucking the ball loose and then throwing 3 interceptions for sure. He did throw 34 times, though, so it's not like he only threw 21 times like Bailey Zappe did. But on the ground, he didn't really have to throw very well because Austin Eckler had 16 carries, 173 yards, and 1 touchdown. And then Josh Kelly had 10 carries for 49 yards and 1 touchdown. Their running backs took over this game. The Browns just had no run-stopping defense or no answers for this squad. Mike Williams was their leading receiver with 10 catches, 134 yards, and then Austin Eckler had 4 catches for 26 yards, 1 touchdown. Pretty good game for the Chargers, honestly. I mean, obviously the defense couldn't hold up as well as you'd think it would with guys like Derwin James and Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. But they did just enough to squeak out a W. On the Brown side of things, Jacoby Brissett, 230 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He wasn't really that bad. I just think the Browns will be Browns, right? Nick Chubb continues to be, in my opinion, the best running back in the league right now. He had 17 carries, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And his fellow running back in that tandem, Kareem Hunt, had 11 carries for 47 yards and 1 touchdown. Their leading receiver was David Njoku, who turns out to be a tight end. I'm kind of happy about that because I did start him in fantasy, and I still lost in that league. But that's okay. He had 6 receptions for 88 yards. And then right behind him, Amari Cooper, 7 catches for 76 yards, 1 touchdown. So, really, a more thrilling game than I assumed it would be. I got stuck watching the Jaguars-Texans game, and I really would much rather to have this game. But more thrilling game than I thought it was going to be. Chargers over Browns 30-28. By the way, this is non-intentional. I actually didn't know a game I was covering next, but I actually have Texans-Jaguars. And the Texans ended up beating the Jaguars 13-6. And I apologize to any Jaguars fans that I overhyped, because I thought the Jaguars turned a new leaf and that they were going to be good this year. Apparently, after this week, I seem to be wrong if they keep up this pace. The Texans beat the Jaguars 13-6. Talk about a freaking awful game to watch. Davis Mills, the battle, or it was just battle of the mediocre last year drafted quarterbacks, I guess. Davis Mills had 140 yards. No touchdowns, no interceptions. That's it. Damian Pierce had 26 carries for 99 yards and 1 touchdown. He was actually pretty good. He ended up putting the nail in the coffin against the Jaguars. He's the reason they won. The only touchdown scored in the entire game. Nico Collins was the Texans' leading receiver with 4 catches for 65 yards. That's the only guy worth mentioning because, Brandon Cooks was kind of quiet out there. He just had 20 yards. For the Jaguars, Trevor Lawrence had 286 yards and 2 interceptions. One of them was a last-second Hail Mary last-minute Hail Mary attempt that ended up getting intercepted. The other one was a really questionable throw that ended up getting picked off by Derek Stingley. There was the guy that he was throwing to was already well covered, and then Derek Stingley was just basically sitting right in front of him and ended up getting picked off. It seemed like a stupid play to me because it was. Their leading rusher was Travis Etienne, who had 10 carries for 71 yards. He was actually pretty good. And then James Robinson only had 10 carries, the same as Travis Etienne, but didn't do nearly as much. He had 10 carries, 27 yards. Their leading receiver was Marvin Jones, who had 7 catches for 104 yards. He was good. And then Evan Ingram had 6 for 69. And then Travis Etienne had 3 for 43, so pretty solid. The only thing I say is Christian Kirk. If they got him a little bit more active, I feel like they probably could have had a better chance at winning that game because he only had 1 catch for 11 yards. But nonetheless, Texans over Jaguars 13-6. All right, so this next game, Buccaneers-Falcons. And you know what? I'm not going to sugarcoat it right here. This game, it was a lot closer than it should have been, in my opinion, because the Bucs were completely healthy. I think the Falcons had no business being in this game, but they proved that they wanted this. And then Tom Brady got a ridiculous flag to go his way. That should not have happened. So the play was, before I get into the stats, the play was, basically Tom Brady got sacked. Grady Jarrett tried to get off of him, so he accidentally rolled over him just to kind of get back on his feet, and they called it a roughing the passer call, which is completely unnecessary. That happens. If that happens to any other quarterback, that's not going to be a penalty. Let's be completely freaking honest here. But moving on to stats before I keep rambling on. The stats of Falcons. Marcus Mariota threw 147 yards, 1 touchdown. Nothing remarkable. There's a lot of quarterbacks I talk about, and there's really nothing remarkable about the games that they have. Their leading rusher, though, was also Marcus Mariota. 7 carries for 61 yards, makes up for the lack of passing yards. And then Avery Williams ended up having 3 rushes for 11 yards and 1 touchdown. I only mentioned that because he scored. And then Tyler Algier had 13 carries for 45. And then Caleb Huntley had 8 for 34. Their leading receiver was Olamide Zaccheaus, who had 2 catches for 39 yards and 1 touchdown. Drake London had a relatively quiet game with 4 catches for 35 yards. And Kyle Pitts had 0 catches because he did not play. That's fun, right? And then also Cordero Patterson is placed on IR, which means he's going to miss at least 3 more weeks after this game. So that's fun. And then on the Bucs side of things, Tom Brady threw 351 yards, 1 touchdown. He threw 52 passes. Looking at the amount of times he passed, you think he would have thrown more than 1 touchdown. But, I digress. Leonard Fournette had 14 carries for 56 yards and 1 touchdown. And then Rachaad White had 5 for 14. Leonard Fournette also was their leading receiver, who had 10 catches for 83 yards and 1 touchdown. Mike Evans had 4 for 81. He actually had a really, really cool extension catch. It was pretty good. And then Chris Godwin had 6 for 61. Other than that, nothing special. I mean, Russell Gage had 2 for 20. But I think the Bucs got lucky. And I think that's a game that the Falcons had a very good chance of winning because that sack also happened on a 3rd down, which would mean they would have had a punt, and the Falcons would have had a chance to score and take a lead. So, Bucs over Falcons 21-15. All right, this next game was all Bills, baby. Bills over Steelers 38-3. What a game, bro. For the Steelers, quarterback Kenny Pickett threw 52 times and completed 34 of them. Not bad. 327 yards, 1 interception, no passing touchdowns. And I would like to say about Kenny Pickett, I think this first game, he looked good in a blowout. I think his defense kind of let him down, and they did a disservice to him by throwing him into action so quick. Like they shouldn't have done that, in my opinion. Like they should have let him adjust a little bit more. But it is what it is, huh? Jalen Warren was their leading rusher with 5 carries for 24 yards. Najee Harris was bad with 11 carries for 20 yards. He has not been good this season. I'll just say that. And then their leading receiver was George Pickens, who had 6 catches for 83 yards. Deontay Johnson had 5 for 60, and then Chase Claypool had 5 for 50. They were solid. All around, like, they were solid. But for the Bills, they were way more than solid. They were real good. The Bills, Josh Allen threw 20 of 31 for 424 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. That interception just was clear that was a rare occurrence because he did not do it again for sure. Devin Singletary had 6 carries for 42 yards. They probably should have gotten him the ball a little bit more, honestly. And then Josh Allen had 5 for 42, tying their leading rusher with their quarterback. James Cook got in the end zone for the first time in his young career. Congratulations, young man. I almost said old man. He is older than me, but he's very young. 4 carries, 31 yards, 1 touchdown. Gabe Davis was remarkable with only 3 catches in the game. He had 3 catches, 171 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He had a 98-yard bomb of a touchdown, and that turns out not to even be his best catch of the game. He had a one-handed 60-something yard touchdown. So, yeah, he was very good. And then Stephon Diggs also had a very good game. He had 8 catches for 102 yards, 1 touchdown. And then Khalil Shakir had 3 catches for 75 yards and 1 touchdown. That's also his first touchdown of his career. So, good for them, right? Also, Kaiir Elam, the rookie corner, I believe this was his first interception of his career. So, talk about a game for young guys, right? But either way, Bills over Steelers, 38-3. All right, I will say here, I kind of feel bad for the Dolphins because both of their quarterbacks ended up going down with a concussion. Teddy Bridgewater played this game against the Jets for 1 pass. He threw 1 pass, then went down with a concussion. So some dude named Skylar Thompson ended up coming in, but he wasn't really that bad either. He ended up throwing 19 of 33 for 166 yards and 1 interception, 0 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert ended up being the catalyst on offense for them. He had 18 carries for 113 yards, 1 touchdown, and then Durham Smythe had one carry for 1 yard and 1 touchdown. Tyreek Hill had 7 catches for 47 yards. Mike Gesicki had 1 for 30. Myles Gaskin had 3 for 24. Jalen Waddle had 3 for 23. Nothing special, but obviously you can't really expect much from a guy that I didn't hear of before this game. Like, I had no clue who Skylar Thompson was before this game. Zach Wilson played a very clean game, 210 yards, but he played a little bit too clean. 0 touchdowns as well as 0 interceptions. Breece Hall was completely great, like remarkable in this game. 18 carries for 97 yards, 1 touchdown. He also had 2 catches for 100 yards. Michael Carter ended up getting in the end zone twice as well. 10 carries for 21 yards and 2 touchdowns. Braxton Berrios had 1 carry. He turns out to be a wide receiver, mind you. 1 carry for 15 yards and 1 touchdown. Also, Zach Wilson got in on the fun. 4 carries for 2 yards and 1 touchdown. Their next receiver other than Breece Hall was their leading receiver. But their next receiver was Corey Davis, who had 2 catches for 38 yards. And then Garrett Wilson, who had 3 for 27. But yeah, I mean, kind of unlucky for the Dolphins. They lost 40-17. But good on the Jets, though. Like, they seem to be doing pretty good, especially with Zach Wilson under center again. So good for them. 40-17, Jets over Dolphins. Another game that turned out to be a little bit better than I originally thought it was going to be. Bears versus Vikings. The Vikings are 4-1. I mean, like, good on them. They've been pretty good. The only the time they lost was in prime time because Kirk Cousins completely threw up on himself again. But for the Bears, Justin Fields was good. He had 208 yards and 1 touchdown. I'd say that's the first time this season I can say Justin Fields was good. He threw just as many passes as Bailey Zappi, though, so take all of that with a grain of salt. He also carried the ball 8 times for 47 yards, and then David Montgomery had 12 for 20 for 1 touchdown. Khalil Herbert, who's been a really good guy rushing the ball the past few weeks, had just 4 carries for 11 yards. David Montgomery was their leading receiver as well with 4 catches for 62 yards. Darnell Mooney had 2 for 52. Cole Kmet had 4 for 45. And then Velus Jones Jr. had 1 catch for 9 yards and 1 touchdown. On the Vikings side of things, Kirk Cousins was actually not bad. He had 296 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. There is another guy in the passing category. His name is Justin Jefferson. He threw 1 pass and completed it for 23 yards. He also caught 12 passes for 154 yards. On the ground, it was Dalvin Cook all day. 18 carries for 94 yards and 2 touchdowns. Kirk Cousins also rushed for 1 touchdown. He had 4 carries for 4 yards, 1 touchdown. Irv Smith ended up having 4 catches for 42 yards, and then it was KJ Osborne who had 5 for 41. Quiet night for Adam Thielen, 4 catches for 27 yards. Pretty good game. The Vikings win it over the Bears 29-22. All right, now I got Titans Commanders, which actually turned out to be a solid game. Not super high scoring, but it was close up until the end. Titans ended up beating the Commanders, to not my surprise. I expected them to actually win by a lot more. The Titans win over the Commanders 21-17. For the Titans, Ryan Tannehill played another mediocre game. I think it's still just a matter of time until Malik Willis steals his job. I think that is really just a matter of time. It's going to happen. He wasn't very good. I think Derrick Henry carried him again for the second week in a row. He's finally getting his stuff back together. King Henry is just polishing his crown right now. 28 carries for 102 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, I forgot how to pronounce his name, had 2 catches for 72 yards. Robert Woods had 4 for 37. Dontrell Hilliard had 4 for 23 and 1 touchdown. And then their rookie, I forgot what his name was, rookie wide receiver. Of course, I don't know his name because he's not very good right now. Treylon Burks, that's his name. Treylon Burks did not have 1 catch today. Or this day. I'm not quite sure if he even played or not. He might have been out. I'm not sure, but he's had an underwhelming start of the season, to be completely honest. For the Commanders, Carson Wentz really wasn't that bad, in my opinion. He threw 359 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 1 interception, so he cut down the picks and still threw 2 touchdowns. Brian Robinson is officially back after being shot in the leg earlier this year. He had 9 carries for 22 yards. Antonio Gibson clearly lost his job. As I said last week, I assumed this was going to happen. You can literally quote me on that. You can go back and listen to last week's episode, and I literally said something about that. It might have been the week before, I don't know, but I said it. I promise you that. And then Antonio Gibson literally just had 3 carries for 6 yards. He wasn't good, and like I said, Brian Robinson, it's his time to shine. Diami Brown had 2 catches for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. 2 touchdowns on 2 catches, I'd say, is quite impressive. Terry McLaurin had 5 for 76. Curtis Samuel had 6 for 62. So yeah, a pretty solid game all around. If you watched this game, you probably enjoyed it, even though it was only 21-17. But the Titans take it. An enjoyable game. All right, now this game, even way, way more impressive and fun to watch than the game I just talked about. Saints, Seahawks, 39-32, stunning victory for the Saints. And for the Saints, Andy Dalton threw 187 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And then Taysom Hill, talk about a monster game. He threw 1 pass, completed it for 22 yards, 1 touchdown. He also rushed 9 times for 112 yards and 3 touchdowns, 4 total touchdowns for this guy. Nicknamed the Swiss Army knife for a reason. Alvin Kamara was actually quite good. He had 23 carries for 103 yards. And then receiving, it was Alvin Kamara. He had 6 catches for 91 yards. Chris Olave caught 4 passes for 54 yards and 1 touchdown. And then Adam Troutman had 2 catches for 32 yards and 1 touchdown. On the Seahawks side of things, Geno Smith continues his amazing play, proving that the Broncos probably should have traded for him instead. Geno Smith had 268 yards and 3 touchdowns on pretty good percentage, too. 16 out of 25. Kenneth Walker had 8 carries for 88 yards, 1 touchdown. Rashad Penny had just 8 carries for 54 yards. And that's because he's hurt. Sadly, he is done for the year. He had a pretty good season, and I feel bad for him, but I do look forward to seeing what Kenneth Walker can do for the rest of the year, for sure. Receiving-wise, Tyler Lockett had 5 catches for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. DK Metcalf had 5 for 88 and 1 touchdown. And then Noah Fant was pretty good too, had 3 for 49. So a good game to watch. Not just a good game to watch, a great game to watch. And I actually wish I could have watched this game. Any game other than the Jaguars. All right, now this game I'm going to try to go fast because it was complete and utter domination. 49ers Panthers 37-15. 49ers take the W. And I will say real quick, the Panthers right after this loss did fire head coach Matt Rule. So I don't remember the interim head coach taking his place, but it's going to be a rough ride for the rest of the season. Although it might help, it might completely blow up in their faces. But for the 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo threw 253 yards and 2 touchdowns. Probably the one who got Matt Rule fired. He played pretty well. Jeff Wilson had 17 carries for 120 yards, 1 touchdown. Maybe it was him. And then Tevin Coleman had 8 for 23 and 1 touchdown. Deebo Samuel only rushed 2 times, but he did get 12 yards on those 2 rushes. Brendan Ayuk had 3 for 58. George Kittle had 5 for 47. Juwan Jennings had 2 for 45, and then Tevin Coleman had 3 for 44, 1 touchdown. Deebo Samuel did catch 2 passes for 20 yards and 1 touchdown. On the Panthers side of things, Baker Mayfield, 215 yards and 1 interception. He did get injured, and P.J. Walker came in for him. So we might see P.J. Walker next game and not Sam Darnold. Christian McCaffrey had 14 carries for 54 yards and 1 touchdown. He was actually pretty good for all the crap I give him this year. He was pretty good. Shea Smith ended up leading them in receiving yards with 4 for 69. And then DJ Moore had 4 for 59. And then Christian McCaffrey 7 for 50. Robbie Anderson only had 1 catch for 32 yards. So overall, the good stats for the Panthers, like other than Baker Mayfield, like they had good stats. But the 49ers, it was just complete and utter domination. If you watched the highlights of that game or even watched it, it was completely 49ers all the way. All right, I'm just going to start off by saying that the Eagles very well could get to the Super Bowl this year. They are officially 5-0. The Eagles ended up beating the Cardinals 20-17. They had a late chance to tie the game with a field goal. After a Kyler Murray spike, and Matt Amendola ended up missing the field goal. Just a really rough year for this guy. I kind of feel bad for him. But for the Eagles, Jalen Hurts threw 239 yards, 0 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, but he rushed for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns. Receiving-wise, Dallas Goedert had 8 catches for 95 yards, and then Devonta Smith had 10 for 87. A.J. Brown had 3 for 32. And that's basically it on the Eagles side of things. Kyler Murray had 250 yards throwing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. James Conner had 9 for 55 rushing. Kyler Murray also had 4 for 42 rushing. And then Eno Benjamin got in the end zone, 25 yards for 1 touchdown for him. Receiving-wise, it was Marquise Brown that ended up leading them in receiving yards and receptions. He had 8 catches for 78 yards and 1 touchdown. Rondale Moore had 7 for 68. And then Zach Ertz had 6 for 48. And that's basically it for this game. Eagles ended up taking a relatively underwhelming win, but it's a win nonetheless. Every win is a win. Like, you can't take that away from anybody. So the Eagles ended up taking over the Cardinals 20-17. All right, this next game really freaking surprised me. Cowboys-Rams. The Cowboys ended up beating the Rams 22-10. The Cowboys are officially 4-0 this year with Cooper Rush as starter, so that really means something. And I said last week could be a quarterback controversy, and that's even reinstated this week. Even though he wasn't very good, he threw for just 102 yards. He only threw 16 passes though. On the ground, Tony Pollard had 8 carries for 86 yards and 1 touchdown. Then Ezekiel Elliott had 22 carries for 78 yards. Receiving wise, it was CeeDee Lamb who had 5 for 53, and then Michael Gallup had 4 for 44. Noah Brown only had 1 catch in this game, 1 for 5 yards. And then that's basically it. For the Rams, it was Matt Stafford that ended up kind of throwing the game. He had one very, very, very poor throw that ended up getting intercepted. Thus his only interception, but I think this doesn't really say very much. Like, I think the stat sheet doesn't prove how bad he really was. He threw 308 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And then rushing-wise, it was Cam Akers who had 13 for 33, not very great. And then Cooper Kupp had 7 catches for 125 yards and 1 touchdown. He continues to be remarkable. Tutu Atwell ended up catching 1 catch for 54 yards, his first catch in the NFL. Good for this young man. And then Tyler Higbee had 7 catches for 46 yards. And then Ben Skoranek had 6 catches for 41 yards. All that's worth mentioning. I mean, Allen Robinson had 3 catches for 12 yards again. Another bad game. I know. I don't. It was either last week or the week before that I said Allen Robinson was my underwhelming player of the week or really underperforming player of the year, and I can stand by that. He continues to be bad. But Cowboys over Rams 22-10. All right, now I'm going to talk about my final 2 games. This will be Sunday night game, Bengals Ravens. Ravens squeak out the W barely over the Bengals 19-17. For the Bengals on their side of things, Joe Burrow threw 217 yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. He played, okay, I guess. And then rushing, it was Joe Mixon who had 14 carries for 78 yards. Joe Burrow did rush 3 times for 6 yards and 1 touchdown. He was, at least he got in the end zone twice and not just once. And then Hayden Hurst had 6 catches for 53 yards and 1 touchdown. Jamar Chase had 7 for 50. Samaje Perine 4 for 39. And then Michael Thomas, no, not that Michael Thomas, not the one for the Saints, the different Michael Thomas, had 1 catch for 33 yards. On the Ravens side of things, 174 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception for Lamar Jackson. That interception actually went to Von Bell, who has more interceptions this year than he did in his first, I think, 3 or 4 years. And he's already at 5 this year. He had 4 over those first few years. So that's pretty remarkable in my opinion. Rushing-wise, Lamar Jackson ended up leading the Ravens to nobody's surprise. He had 12 carries for 58 yards. J.K. Dobbins had 8 for 44. Kenyon Drake 4 for 26. And then receiving-wise, Mark Andrews continues to be one of the best tight ends in the league. He is behind one tight end that I've yet to talk about. I bet you can guess who that is. But Mark Andrews had 8 catches for 89 yards and 1 touchdown. And then it was Devin Duvernay, who continues to be pretty solid out of nowhere. He had 5 catches for 54 yards. And then Tylan Wallace had 1 for 8. Demarcus Robinson 1 for 8. Isaiah Likely 2 for 7. Prochet had 1 for 7. Kenyon Drake had 1 for 1. I just said all of those because he spread out the ball very well Sunday night. Talking about Lamar Jackson. So yeah, a fun game to watch, even though it was low scoring. Came down to the wire, but a good game overall. Ravens over Bengals 19-17. All right, now I'm talking about the Monday night game just last night for me. It was crazy. Talk about a game that nobody expected to be as good as it was. That turned out to be one of the best games of the year. A remarkable comeback for the Chiefs. They ended up beating the Raiders 30-29. At halftime, they were losing 20-10. They ended up going down 17-0 at one point, and then they came back. Wasn't even close all the way. It was clearly Chiefs. But for the Raiders, before I get to the Chiefs side of things, for the Raiders, 241 passing yards and 2 touchdowns for Derek Carr. Josh Jacobs was also very good. He had 21 carries for 154 yards and 1 touchdown. And then receiving-wise, Davante Adams only had 3 catches, but he didn't need many catches to get it done. He had 124 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jacobs also had 5 catches for 39 yards. Hunter Renfrow 4 for 29. Or not 29, 25, excuse me. And then on the Chiefs side of things, Patrick Mahomes played like, Patrick Mahomes. I don't really know what else I would expect. But he had 292 yards and 4 touchdown passes. All of those touchdown passes going to tight end Travis Kelce. He had 7 catches for 25 yards and 4 touchdowns. Rushing-wise for them, he had it was 8 carries and 53 yards for Jerick McKinnon. And then Edwards-Helaire had 9 for 15, not even 2 yards a carry. So, yeah, he got benched, obviously. And then Marquez Valdes-Scantling had 6 catches for 90 yards, and then Mecole Hardman had 4 for 73. And then 3 for 33 for Juju Smith-Schuster. But talk about a game, 30-29, came down to the wire, quite literally 30-29. And the Raiders fall to 1-4. I think at this point it's only a matter of time until Josh McDaniels gets fired, because Matt Rule just got fired, and both of them are 1-4 right now. So it's just a matter of time. But either way, a thrilling game to watch, 30-29, Chiefs over Raiders. All right, so my unexpectedly good player of the week and or best player of the week. I know I called it unexpectedly good player of the week at the start of the year, but it's basically just best player of the week. I ended up picking Gabe Davis, who had, as I said before, had 3 catches for 171 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I very well could have gone with his teammate Josh Allen, who threw 4 touchdowns just to 1 interception, but 2 of those touchdowns ended up going to Davis. And 171 yards on 3 catches is just too remarkable to pass up. That one-handed catch just adds some flashy points, and then that 98-yard catch was also remarkable. So I think it's really hard to you can't really understate how incredible his performance was on just 3 catches. So he is my unexpectedly good player of the week and or best player of the week. All right, so my unexpectedly bad player of the week is not really a player, it's more of a team, but I did end up picking a specific player from that team. The Jacksonville Jaguars. What the frick happened, man? Like, I thought this was going to be a blowout in the Jaguars' favor, and they ended up losing 13-6. Like, how? Like, their defense played well. They only allowed 13 points, but their offense never got anything going. So I ended up picking Trevor Lawrence just because he's the guy facilitating the offense, and he never got started through 2 interceptions to 0 touchdowns. I also could pick Christian Kirk, who just had 1 catch for 11 yards, and or James Robinson, who rushed just 10 times for 27 yards. But, Trevor Lawrence, he has to pick it up at one point, and he's just so unpredictable at how he's going to play each game. It's kind of insane. But, like, the thing is, it's hard to predict how the Jaguars are going to play because Doug Peterson has been a very good head coach, no doubt in my mind about that. But I think there has to come a point in time where Trevor has to step it up. Otherwise, it's going to be very clear he's not the answer here in Jacksonville. All right, thank you all so much for listening in today. I really appreciate it. As always, I'll be back next week with an NFL Week 6 recap and maybe a little bit more NBA news because the season starts next week. But as I said, thank you all for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Chris Higgins, and this has been Fanatic Breakdown.